Okay.
Okay.
So it sounds like we're ready. It looks like we're ready to go because people now see the interpreter.
Kimberly, Robin, I think we're all set.
Thank you. I really truly appreciate everybody waiting and dealing with technical difficulties. It's first time ever doing this, and we have been trying to work on getting this all taken care of. And thank you for all of the kind wishes in the chat box. I am trying to breathe deep, trying to make it work. So we're getting started late, and I really apologize. I would like to thank everybody for joining us. We have captions available in Zoom. If you click on show subtitle in your Zoom menu bar to turn them on. Captions are also running on streamtext.net, and I believe that link has been put in the chat several times. If somebody else could help out with that and put it back in, it would be great. There's also a chat feature on StreamText. You're welcome to submit questions via that thread or comments, and we'll monitor them and voice anything during the Q&A. Sorry, I talk with my hands. Obviously, we have ASL interpreters today, and now that I figured it out, we are presenting in gallery view. So the interpreter should always be visible. Let's see here. The event is going to be recorded, and we don't know at this point yet where we're going to house it, but once we figure it out, I will send an email out to all attendees to be able to access the recording. Let's see here. We also will have a question and answer period after the panel presentation. And please note that we will use both person with a disability and disabled person interchangeably, recognizing people's preferences for person first, identity first language. And I skipped a step and I apologize. So my name is Kimberly Meck. I am the Executive Director of the Alliance of People with Disabilities and a parent webinar Zoom novice. I am a white female with a blue button down shirt on and a white shirt underneath. I have my long hair pulled back with a ponytail holder. In the background, you happen to see part of my ceiling fan. Wanted to also introduce my co-host and partner in crime, Robin Tatsuda.
Thanks, Kimberly. Hi, everyone. My name's Robin Tatsuda. I'm the executive director at the ARC of King County. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm sitting in my, I guess, my home office, which is also a guest room. I'm a biracial cis female with short, dark hair, wearing headphones that has a little earpiece, and a cozy sort of purplish knit sweater that my mom made me. And we're very, very excited to have you all here, and we're grateful for your patience as we work through the tech. Tonight is going to be a really deep and I think valuable night for everyone. But let me give you some background first. Like, why are we here? So this event is being hosted by the King County Disability Consortium, which is a group of over 40 disability serving organizations and individual disability activists and advocates. The consortium was formed in spring 2020 as the disability community recognized how little the COVID response considered our unique needs. Over the months, this consortium has advocated with King County to recognize and respond to disability as an equity and social justice issue. The county has expressed the desire to join this work and has been honest in recognizing that they don't fully understand the issue, which leads us to tonight. This listening session is the first of what we hope to be many events led by the disability community promoting disability justice within the King County enterprise. Tonight, we're starting off small, and I say that sort of ironically because this is not a small conversation, introducing the concept of ableism, disability intersectionality, and the importance of allyship across all civil rights work. We're thankful to have this incredible panel join us tonight, and they'll introduce themselves in a minute as they share their own lived experiences and expertise so that we as a community can grow together. So with that, Kimberly, I'm going to hand it back to you. You're muted, Kimberly.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Robin. And thank you for giving the understanding of where we're coming from and why we're here. It has been a long journey, and it has been much appreciated to have all of the allies work with us that we have had. It's been an exciting time. I'm going to give an opportunity for our panelists to introduce themselves, and I will call on our panelists in order to be able to move through the list. So the first panelist is Jay Kim.
Hi everyone, my name is Jay. I'm Information and Resource Coordinator here, the ARC of King County. I use she, her pronoun. I am wearing a shirt and have long black hair tied in back. Behind of me is a virtual background of a pink room. At the ARC, I forward calls or emails asking about services and support to appropriate staff members on our team because each of us has different knowledge in different areas. Sometimes I respond to emails if the topic is my interests. Also, I manage our online community calendar and resource guide where I post updated information about disability services around King County area, reading materials, and deciding whether they are suitable for our families. I give presentations and training to community and share my lived experiences as a person with disability. My personal story helps people to understand the contents better. I run Smooth Talkers, monthly meetup for who use communication devices, and a support group for people with disabilities. Those are my main tasks, but I do other things as needed.
Thank you, Jay. I really appreciate it. Vince?
Unmute.
Hi, folks. Hi, folks. My name is Vince Medrano. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a 29-year-old trans male. I'm sitting in front of a light gray wall in my home office, which is also my dining room. I have brown and silver headphones on, and I'm wearing a gray polo shirt. I'm Mexican and I have light medium skin tone. I wear glasses. I have short dark brown hair, which is swept to the left. I have dark brown eyes. I'm a Master of Social Work student at the University of Washington. I'm currently doing my practicum at Western State Hospital, which is a state-run psychiatric hospital in Lakewood. I also work for a nonprofit in Seattle, primarily as an evaluator for our programs in the prevention department. I'm a volunteer with NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and I co-facilitate a mental health support group, and most recently, an LGBTQ+ support group. I have schizoaffective bipolar type, anxiety, a mild neurocognitive impairment, and last year, I was diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. My career goal is to work with people with schizophrenia spectrum disorders like schizoaffective and schizophrenia, primarily in the areas of self-advocacy, resiliency, recovery, and working with marginalized communities like BIPOC, immigrant, and low-income communities to address stigma and other barriers to get folks with psychosis into treatment earlier. I also have an awesome, fluffy, and very chatty cat named Booger. He has greenish yellow eyes, and his fur is a silky warm brown with curly cream-colored belly. He's a big guy. He's about 16 pounds, and you might hear or see him during this meeting. He's right here.
Thank you, Vince. I really appreciate it. Christiana?
Hello, my name is Christiana Obi Sumner. My pronouns are they, them. I am a Black and Indigenous non-binary person. I am wearing a red turban that has golden brackets on it, black secretary glasses, and red lipstick. I'm also wearing a gray shirt with a red and black blazer and a necklace with an amethyst on it. I'm sitting in a black gaming chair in a room with a purple curtain covering a mirror, so a guitar, light with plants in the background, and what I can only describe as a mountain of books. I am a principal and CEO of Epiphanies of Equity LLC, which is a social equity consulting firm that focuses on intersectionality of anti-racism and Black liberation, disability justice, gender justice, or LGBTQIA plus inclusion, sizeism and fat phobia, as well as classism, among other things. I have a spouse that you may hear who just came home from work, who is a essential worker. And I also have a small 6 to 7 pound tricolor Yorkshire Terrier that has a tan and white face with a black and white body. And you may hear and or see him running around in the background. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Christiana. Angela.
Thank you. Hello. My name is Angela Therault. And I'm sorry, just one moment for the interpreter.
I identify as she, her. I am deafblind. I have purple hair on my shoulders, down to my shoulders. Go ahead, Corinne.
And I have a little stone in my necklace I'm wearing today. I'm wearing a black jacket and a black shirt, and I have several rings on my fingers. I have a watch, which is very interesting. It's a touch watch. So you can feel the time on the watch, and that lets me know what time it is. I don't use a digital, I use one that's better for my vision needs. I have a dark blue background behind me so that it's simpler for folks with vision issues or visual disabilities to see me. I am at the Deafblind Center. I work as the director, and I have 2 deaf interpreters who are sitting here with me because I have a hard time seeing on the screen. It's pretty blurry for me, so they are letting me know what's happening. And yes, back to you.
Thank you very much, Angela. I appreciate it. And Eric.
Hello, my name is Eric Mathis. My pronouns are he, him. What's behind me is a white wall with my closet. Above my closet is 2 dream catchers, and I am wearing a black shirt that says racism, and I'm a person with Down syndrome, and I love life. I'm also drinking some water that's right by me, and I have an Apple Watch around my wrist.
Hey, Eric, you're muted. Can you unmute yourself? Thank
Okay.
you. And then start again. We heard you say Apple Watch.
Yes, I have an Apple Watch around my wrist that tells me the time. That is digital. And it has my brother on 4 paws, which is a cat that my parents have. I do live alone in an apartment. I've been living alone for 7 years and doing really great. Have great support with my family and doing really well. I am a civil rights activist working at the King County for 11 years now and enjoying and working on a team called the advocacy team that is leading that is called excuse me, oh golly, an advocacy team at the King County. There's a program called the Community Change Champions Program. I help support self-advocates to their full potential in civic engagement, in legislative advocacy, and the importance of civil rights movement in Washington state that we call home. I've been doing that for 40 plus years, and it's been a passion, a spark, and I enjoy it. It's kind of like Martin Luther King Jr., which we celebrated this week, leading African Americans, civil rights. I help people with developmental disabilities know their rights and fight for a better life, kind of like a parade. People with disabilities are leading and doing what's important for us in the developmental disability community. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate it. We do have a couple of helpers with us. So you might see some other names on the screen. They're helping us to monitor chat as well as Q&A. I just wanted to make you aware of that's who the other names that are hanging out are. Okay, so I need to stop being flustered after that difficult start. So as a reminder, this is the first of what we hope will be many events. We're only going to scratch the surface today. We really could probably speak all night and over 24 hours about some of these topics. And we understand that, but what we're trying to do right now is to give, I guess, a better understanding of some of the basic principles of ableism and how they intersect with racism. These are really complex, important topics. And so we're going to try and keep it brief today so we can stay within our time frame. But please be aware that this, again, is probably the first of many events. We're hoping to do them monthly. And keep your ears and eyes open for announcements for upcoming events that will, now that we've gone through all these horrible troubleshooting periods, will be much easier to handle.
So just so you know, we've crafted some questions for the panelists ahead of time so they could prepare. People who registered by last week, we looked through the questions to help us craft these. And then after our kind of main kind of questions happen, we'll have some time for Q&A. So we'll do our best to have people's questions answered, but also know that, again, as Kimberly said, there's so much to say and so little time that we're really going to have to move through things quickly. But I'm excited to kick things off with questions. So I will introduce the first question, and just so you can gear yourself up, Jay, I'm hoping that you'll be the first to answer. So my question is, how do you define ableism, and how does it show up in your day-to-day experience?
Ableism is discrimination towards people with disabilities, and that non-disabled people judge based on someone's ability to do something. While we talk about racism, gender, other ISM, we leave out disability in the conversation. People with disabilities are most likely to drop out of high school and cannot get higher education or have a job. In the developmental disability world, most advocacy and service development is done by non-disabled professionals and or non-disabled parents, but almost never done by people with DD. To change that, I have been doing with King County, like employment first. Ableism comes up every day, especially with my visual disability, that I cannot really hide it. For example, people usually baby talk to me because they think I'm a child. This makes me want to run over them with my wheelchair, even though I never have done it. They see my disability instead of seeing me as a person. Or people usually don't talk directly to me. They speak to people around me like my caregiver or coworkers. People don't take time to understand my communication device and just assume I cannot communicate. This makes me feel like I'm an invisible person. It is like I am there, but I'm not. However, I really love when my coworkers tell people ask Jay, because I can be like, see, I can answer you. Also, due to my physical limitations, I live with my parents, who are very supportive, and moved to United States mainly to give me a better life. Because I don't have caregiver, my mom drove me to school every day and waited outside while I was in classes. I am grateful for her, but sometimes I feel like my parent overprotect me. Even though I know how to feel and want best for me, it makes me feel frustrated, or I can't do anything by myself. For example, my mom wasn't comfortable with me going around the campus by myself. She worried I might get hurt, or something might happen to me. She knows that I can do it, but she just can't stop worrying, because I can't do almost anything physically. As a 26-year-old, I would like to be alone and be like everyone else. I often don't listen to her because she is too protective. I think that I need independent skills, since I would like to live by myself someday in an apartment that is decorated all pink and do whatever I want. I was placed and decided to put me in a special education class, LRC2, and I stayed in LRC2 until high school. They didn't evaluate me based on my knowledge. They assumed that I was not able to learn like any other students due to my disabilities. Teachers had me play games or watch movies that were about life skills. I barely did academic work. I remember we had a circle time where we talked about things like which day was it. Although LRC2 taught me variety things, such as how to be independent and do things by myself, I unknowingly lost a chance to learn, and it feels like I have a hole in my education. I also wasn't given a communication device until 9th grade, and I needed to point to each letter on a tray board. It was very frustrating because it was a really slow process, as people would have guessed what I wanted to say after pointing to a few letters. It would have been so much easier if I had a communication device earlier. When I got to high school, it was difficult for me to get used to LRC1 and general education classes. LRC1 is usually students with a learning disability, or those who can learn but need learning accommodations. This environment provides students with supports. I had no idea how to be a normal student who does schoolwork because I didn't have a lot of experiences doing homework assignments. Because I was not ready for a big college, I went to community college and then transferred to UW, where I faced a lot of challenges as a disabled student.
Thanks, Jay. There's a lot to digest in that, and I really appreciate you explaining things. So we're going to move on. Same question for Vince.
Hi, folks. So the way that I define ableism is the overt and the covert discrimination and oppression of people with disabilities, whether that's physical, mental, or other types of disabilities. And it can be as obvious as shouting, derogatory language, or it can be, as sneaky as microaggressions. And I would say the way that it's shown up the most for me in my life has been that I don't, quote unquote, look or act the part of somebody with psychosis or somebody with bipolar. And I'll get comments that, initially come across as compliments, and I might even say thank you. And it's things like, you wear it well, or I never would have guessed, or wow, I'm amazed you work, you're in a master's program. And, you know, initially they do come across as compliments, but ultimately they're ableist. They're rooted in these stereotypes that non-disabled people and the media do keep perpetuating about what somebody with a mental health disorder or what somebody with a disability looks and acts like, and what they can or can't achieve in life. There was one recent event that made a rather profound impact on me. And in this event, I was indirectly bombarded with derogatory ableist language. About a year ago, I attended a mental health first aid training, and it was in person because it was prior to lockdown. And part of the training involved breaking down the stigma of schizophrenia. So the facilitators asked us, the participants, to shout out what we thought about when we hear the word schizophrenia. So I'm not going to repeat what they said because you might be able to imagine what they said. And, you know, they had absolutely no mercy. And the words were right in front of me because the facilitators were writing it down. I was angry. I wanted to cry. I was really distressed and sad in the moment. And after the exercise, the facilitators were like, and never say these words again. And you know, it didn't really matter because, you know, they thought those things, they said those things, and the emotional damage to me and anybody else in that room who might have been affected by schizophrenia, it had already been done. So that was something that really, it messed me up for a few weeks, but it also served to like fuel my fire, if you could say. So that I do have a little bit more passion in terms of, you know, fighting the stigma of, you know, schizophrenia spectrum disorders.
Thank you so much, Vince. Next, Christiana.
Hello. My definition of ableism is complicated because I feel like ableism is something that I experience on one axis, but it's part of a larger sort of piece of feeling as though the that the archetype or sort of the bar of what folks have in their head as what I'm supposed to be when I show up, based on their expectations, their assumptions, their biases, impacts my life adversely. It's oppressive, or it's marginalizing, or it's exploitative. And then the reason why I'm saying it this way is because it doesn't happen in isolation for me. So I never just experience ableism. I experience racialized ableism. Similar to Vince, I don't talk about it very often as publicly. I think a lot of folks know me to be multiply disabled, chronically disabled, and autistic. I also am MAD, and I also share a diagnosis of schizoaffective depressive type and a DID, which was a foundational part of how I got into disability justice in the first place. The way that it comes up in my life, I think, can be really encapsulated in how I came into this piece, which first of all, being a Black autistic person as an 80s baby, and a lot of times being one of the only people of color, let alone Black folks in my school, you know, I was not seen as, oh, well, here's this accommodation, here's this IEP. I was seen as this kid has a behavioral problem and they need to be sanctioned and punished. I don't even remember what high school was like after 9th grade, because they had me leave school early, and then they also put me in the box a lot. But in addition to that, if I was sort of stimming, or if I was sort of, you know, being in my space with my people, that other people don't have to see them, the dare officer would come around and talk screen me, because of course it wasn't that I needed an accommodation. Of course it wasn't that I needed resources. Of course, because I was at that time the only Black kid in my class, I must be on drugs. And then after that was continued to be sort of negative testing. then other sort of escalation happened. And so for me, ableism is similar to me in oppression with racism and queer phobia and sizeism and all those things. It's just, it's at that intersection. So as much as I have to mask and camouflage every day, I have to code switch every day. And it's really difficult to give a definition without those intersections.
Thank you so much, Christiana. It's absolutely true. And I'm glad that you say that. And we're going to dig deeper into that in a couple questions. Angela, you're up next. And meanwhile, very quickly, I'm going to say, if you do have questions for panelists, please use the Q&A box instead of the chat box, because that's a little bit easier for us to track incoming questions. So go ahead, Angela.
Interpreter's trying to find Angela. I cannot see her. There she is. Angela, start over. Start over. I can see you now. I went to a deaf institute and a public school, and I was struggling. There was a lot of challenges for me. And then ADA America was like fantastic. It was great, but I had a lot of experience before that and challenge after challenge after challenge. And still, for many years, it kept happening. There was one problem after another. And also recently, the FCCD, the Communications Act, that's new, that showed up. And that was fantastic. Still, there was all these challenges coming up, one after another. So ableism, that's a tough one. There's a lot of questions around that because I've always been fighting to educate people. This is just a lifelong thing to help people understand. But I applied to the deafblind. Okay, when applied to deafblind people, there are 3 isms. Yes, there are 3 isms with us. The first ism would be audism, AUDISM, and it's very sound related. For example, when the doctor will come in and will bring in the interpreter, they will say, "Oh no, we're fine. We can write back and forth." I mean, that's autism right there. Deciding we don't need an interpreter. Another word is vidism, which means low visual. So like, for example, I am watching television and I'm watching it and the captions are teeny tiny and there's no way to change them. There's no way to make them bigger. I can't. So it's like there's itty bitty teeny tiny things. I have Comcast at home and I can, see if I can change the size, but the system is set up in order I can't change it, which is super frustrating. I call that vidism, visualism. That's the concept that I use anyway. And then distantism, which people are like, what is that? What does that even mean? And I'm tactile. I use touch. Deafblind people prefer tactile language. You've seen it before with the hand in hand with the interpreters, but you try to touch people and like, oh my God, don't touch me. Why is she touching me? Get away. Just touching is an issue. So I call that distantism. So these 3 things are kind of unique to a deafblind person or people in the deafblind community. And it's really a struggle to get through these different things. And, oftentimes there will be no interpreter, like they're not, places are not friendly. There's a lot of things that you can't read and there's no Braille or some people don't read Braille. There's a lot of different pieces to it for me.
Thank you, Angela. Anything else you want to add? No, it looks like you're done. Thank you so much, Angela. Okay, last but not least for this question is Eric.
Hi. For this question, one thing I don't understand is why parents of people with disabilities say like high or low functioning. It seems like they are saying there are high expectations and low expectations when we are just people. It feels like we are being labeled, and labels go on jars or even on bottles or on coffee mugs. Not just us, because we are just like you.
Hey, Eric, I think some of those other notes, that whole section, you can talk about right now.
Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry. Another ableism is some minimum wage. People with disabilities may not have the right to get paid the same amount of equal pay like everyone else. This is called some minimum wage. It's like we are being worked on, but not worked with, for us to be able to have the same wage like everyone else. Excuse me. In my life, so many people always ask me how old I am after doing a speech or a presentation, etc. It is not respectful, and is ableism issue. Why do people ask how old I am? Because I have a disability. But they don't ask other people. Also, so many people go far and say that I'm so inspirational. Basically, they don't get the message of my speech. It's like if you are pouring tea or coffee in a mug, and it is just overflowing, and you don't know when it's enough. It's like that. It is like that for people with disabilities all the time. Also, is from a few years ago, I advocated for a legislative bill in Washington State before you needed an organ transplant. An organ donation, transplant, excuse me, and you were next up online and to get an organ. The doctor, if you could just imagine, there's a line of people and you're next in the line, and the doctor could decide not to give me or anyone with a disability to be up next. I advocated for that bill that turned into law, and they cannot discriminate against people with disabilities. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate everybody's opportunity to provide answers to those questions. Ableism definitely is something that we really need to address. And as you can tell, there are so many different ways that people define it. Yeah. So our next question is, again, going to be to all panelists. And I will remind you that individuals who registered for the event were able to submit questions before the event. And so this question is actually directly taken off of those. And it says, how do you define, or excuse me, how can disabled and non-disabled people be allies in anti-ableist work? One specific question that was asked was, when do you appreciate advocacy and what are ways you communicate your needs? And we're going to start with Jay.
Would say to ask people with disabilities what they want or need before starting to support them. People assume I cannot achieve anything because they set a low bar on me. For example, when I am nearby a door, people open the door for me without thinking I might be waiting for someone. They don't wait for me to say no thanks. They make me go out. I am always like there is an automatic door button for me to open the door by myself. We often forget to listen to their thoughts because people without disabilities believe that disabled people are not able to make correct decisions or they don't know anything. People with disabilities mostly are not being asked what they would like for their lives even though they are adults, which is so depressing to me. People with disabilities have a lot of professionals in their lives who tell the individuals what they should do instead of asking them what they want. This brings up the concept of dignity at risk, which means that everyone takes risks every day in their lives, so why people with disabilities cannot? People with disabilities can be independent and take risk too. For example, my sister can cross a street by herself and she can get hurt by a car, so I cannot cross a street on my own. I mean, that is really horrible example. But what is the difference between me and her? Is it because she can walk and I am in a wheelchair? Or you might have called in sick knowing that your boss can find it out and you can get fired. Taking risks helps you learn and grow. Sometimes I wish I would have took another option because the choice I chose did not give me good results, but I learned something from it. I really appreciate when people value my thoughts and listen. I really love when they are patient while I communicate with my device. The world is not built for us to use our devices, and most people would not be comfortable waiting for us to type on our screen because it is built from medical model, not social model. Medical is a deficit-based thought pattern that focuses on all the things a person cannot do compared to the non-disabled world and demands that the person change. And social model a deficit-based thought pattern that focuses on all the things a person cannot do compared to the non-disabled world and demands that the person change. Being an AAC user is a form of diversity to me, even though it feels lonely. It is very hard for me to use my device outside of our office because most people don't understand me. But I don't think we need to use only our voice to talk. There are so many other ways to communicate.
Oh. Thank you, Jay. I appreciate your answers. Thank you. Vince?
Hi, folks. So in terms of my work in the schizophrenia spectrum field, I'm still fairly new to that. So I'm still learning how to navigate, that world in terms of communicating my needs and, stopping microaggressions when they happen or calling them out. So the first step for me, however, has been to essentially be out about my diagnosis and sort of not silence myself when it comes to that. And I think disabled folks, non-disabled folks working in anti-ableist work should recognize that disabled folks are the expert of their disability. There's a huge difference in knowing something academically and knowing something personally. And it's also possible to know something both personally and academically. And I do think that non-disabled folks should work to uplift the voices of, folks with disabilities, especially those with other marginalized identities whose voices may be suppressed even further. And this uplifting and this co-working should be done in a non-condescending way. And I mention that because I think it's especially important in disability justice, where non-disabled allies might think that disabled folks are less mentally capable, especially when it comes to making the big decisions. And when it comes to making those big decisions and even the small decisions, it's not enough to have that token disabled person at the table to make the non-disabled allies feel that they're being inclusive. I think it's important for disabled folks to be inviting those allies to the table, not the other way around. So it's still something new for me to navigate as I start to launch my career in this field, but I'm excited to navigate that.
Thanks, Vince. Christiana?
Yes. Just to make sure I remember the question, it is sort of how to advocate for disabled folks, right?
Yes, the question is, how can disabled and non-disabled people be allies in anti-ableist work?
I think the difficulty with this question is that there isn't necessarily an answer that I can give you that's going to be a thing. And I know that that's, usually what folks want to have, but there isn't really a thing to do. I mean, like beyond what has been mentioned already, right? Like to essentially the 10 principles of disability justice, center intersectionality, amplified leadership of those most impacted, make sure there's collective access and liberation, recognize wholeness, those sort of things I think are really important. I also think that, there's certain tools and things that people can, obviously, as you may or may not be able to see behind me, but I am in a room full of books, like literally towers of books. And a lot of it is because I also am trying to find these answers, because when people ask me questions for that, I'm always just like, well, it depends on you. And when I mean it depends on you, I mean, especially if there's anything that I can say that is the number one reason that I have seen in all of my community organizing work, all the way up to the consulting work I'm doing, that is leading to inequity, all inequity, it's when, number one, when people think that they have, like that they get it. And especially folks who does not have that lived experience, but even folks who does share that lived experience. So, and I think especially to the latter point, it's important to be able to truly hold intersectionality. I can't tell you how many times I get called in to do mediations between two disabled folks because one disabled person is saying that they should not have to, center a privileged identity, and then the other disabled person is like, yes, and it's like, listen, here's the thing, like, we really do need to ensure that we really just need to ensure that when we're doing this, that we are taking sort of an approach that we're all trying to survive at the end of the day, right? Because we're living in this ableist, capitalist society. It's not saying that those intersections are not important. It's the opposite of what I'm saying. And I think that because we live in a capitalist, ableist society, we can also understand that we're living in a racist society, in an anti-Black society, in a fatphobic society, in a transphobic society, in a queerphobic society. And that at the end of the day, we're fixed in toxic water, sure, and toxicity is seeping in, but the enemy is not us. The enemy is these systems of oppression that have been in place for the last couple hundred years. And I guess the second and last thing I'll say that I have seen usually leads to any sort of inequity is people go on autopilot And when I mean autopilot, it goes back to that sort of like, oh, I'm good. And I see that in particular with folks in this area, because I think that there's this tendency to be like, oh, I'm originally from the East Coast. So I really did believe you, like, oh, well, it's the Pacific Northwest, and everyone is going to be equitable in the Pacific Northwest because that's what the movies and the TV shows told me. And then, when I moved here, it's it's just like anywhere else that's full of humans. It's messy, and there's a lot of messy things that happen. But if there's something that I see is that when we are not being mindful of recognizing the wholeness of other folks and recognizing the intersectionality of other folks and holding interdependence with other folks and working towards collective liberation with other folks and having cross-movement solidarity with other folks and all of those 10 disability justice principles, more than likely it causes harm. And so I guess my call would be, as much as you can and as much as you have the spoons to always center an impact over intent sort of approach, where while it's important, the context of the things, as the old saying goes, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, to ensure that we are always being aware of our impact. And I'll say, even in my intersections, I mess up all the time. So it's something that it's not a privileged person thing. It's just it's a thing, and that would just be my call to action for you.
Thanks, Christiana. I appreciate it. Angela?
This is Angela. From my perspective, for example, it would be like something like, say, the lighting can be an issue.
Sometimes if people see a person with a white cane, they'll grab me and drag me around with it. It's the same, like, if I'm like, what are you doing? They just go, they don't just tell me what I need, but ask. It's really important to ask instead of just jumping in. People who, they might know how deaf people interact. They'll write something down, or they'll communicate, and they'll use a voice. But for deaf people, you sign. For blind people, you talk. But what do you do when someone's deaf and blind? Many people are absolutely clueless. They don't know what to do when they see that. For example, I'll be walking with my cane and I'll go in, to pick up some medicine, maybe get a new prescription, or I check in for a doctor's, and the woman will be like pointing at me, like, you go to the end. And I'm like, well, I can't read if I'm back there. So I have to get a little bit closer to, and they're like, they kind of get nervous. Oh gosh, what do I do? Or I'll feel terrible because, people just don't know what to do with me. Sometimes they don't know, the big, that I need large print. They don't know to write large, but so it's really, really important for me to educate people, use a big pen, write large letters so that I can read it. And then also, one example, when I'm on the bus, I tend to have my phone. I can't see what's around me. I have to look at things very near, and the bus will stop and people will come up and start talking, and they'll be, and I don't know what people are talking about, but I'm like, okay, and I'll be watching my phone or something. And then the people will be like moving around, and I'll feel them jumping up and down. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, because they will have tried to get my attention or something. And then they get very awkward again. They don't know what to do with me. And that's one example about distancing. People don't want to touch me. They don't want me to touch them. They're like, they get all nervous. And that's what I had been talking about before, and also, like letting me know they're there, warning me, and how to communicate. People will talk, or I have an iPhone, and you can text me, but they'll put it on their iPhone to show me something to say. But And if I can read it, I'm like, oh, okay. And then I'll give their mind to phone to text and say text, and they'll be like, wait, no, no. And they'll just start talking. I'll be like, wait, no, look at what I'm showing you here. I can't understand what you're saying. I am deaf. So please text me, use my phone. And they'll be like, oh, okay. And then they'll type it into my phone, and then we can get some communication going. Some people will text something and then they'll show it to me, and then another person will just take over. They'll just take the phone and they'll, type something in, and then they'll do it really small, and I'll be like, I can't read that. It's just too small. So do you mind changing the font so I can see it? And most of the time they don't really realize, like, oh, right, I have to make the font bigger. They don't even know. So, the communication of going back and forth just takes some time to just establish a system that we can use together. And sometimes, like, for example, I'll go to the store and I will, I can't read the labels, and I'll use my iPhone to sort of magnify the label so I can see it. And then some people will look at me and they're like, what are you doing? And do you need some help? And I'll go, sure. If you could text me what that says, I'm happy to have technology, but like, imagine a fully deafblind person. What are they going to do? They can't communicate at all. I can at least read on my iPhone, but people just need to be really flexible and recognize that there are very different communication styles, and ask someone, how do you prefer to communicate? Do you prefer print on palm? Do you prefer Braille? Do you prefer texting back and forth? I mean, you have to be very creative. And I think the rule would be ask and don't assume. Those are the two big rules. Also, this poor you thing. No, not necessary at all. Also, people want to help you and they'll grab you and they'll move you around. Not cool. People with disabilities can do things. They can do the same things. They just do it in a different way. They have a different approach, to how they get through things, and they have different experiences. So that's my perspective on it.
Thank you, Angela. I appreciate it. And Eric.
In my perspective, work with the person instead of on them. Understand what the person is asking and use good, plain language to communicate with each other. Nothing about us without us is basically people with disabilities doing things for ourselves rather than others doing it for us. But if we ask someone for support, that's good. Once we ask for it, let us do the work. Help us when we ask for it. I do know a few people who are good allies. One is very supportive and has been a great ally in making sure people with disabilities are involved in what they are doing. That's what we need from allies. Also, people with disabilities can also be allies with other people with disabilities by being on the same page, talking about the same thing, but in our own words. If we have a guardian or a POA or someone else representing us, make sure that the person with a disability is at the same table to participate and in working with you. Make sure to explain things slower to ensure the person with a disability understand and can participate. There is a thing called the dignity of risk. Part of being an ally is letting people with disabilities to make decisions, including letting us make mistakes. We all learn from our mistakes, but often people with disabilities are not allowed to make mistakes because they are overprotected. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric, and everyone. Gosh, I'm having a lot of fun. I hope other people are too. This is so great to listen to you, and thank you so much for your emotional labor and sharing your experiences with everyone. We're going to move on to the third question. Let's talk about intersectionality of disability and other marginalized identity. How does that play out in your life, and what do you want people to know? So, Jay, take it away.
I feel like my race has impacted on the school's decision when placing me in LRC2 because there were color of students in LRC2 even though they didn't have disabilities. Sometimes I wonder how it would have been different if I was from American background. Since my family is from Korea, my parents are not aware of American culture and its education system, so I was forced to learn a lot of things for myself and became more independent than the average student. I have to ask people other than my parents if I have a question about school because they went to school in Korea, which is very different from the US. My parents also have limited English skills because of this. I have to translate and help them understand things because my English is stronger than theirs. Because of my cerebral palsy, I cannot verbally speak, so I email to communicate or set up in-person appointments where people can read from my communication device. I know a lot of people with disabilities who are immigrants and don't have access Medicaid, and most disability services are Medicaid funded, which means they cannot use them. For example, they are not eligible for Medicaid, so they cannot have caregivers. In this case, they have their family members support them with their personal needs. If the individual is an adult, this makes it even harder for them to be as independent as they would like.
Thank you, Jay. Vince, you want to go next?
Yeah. So I would say intersectionality has played out in two significant ways. One being Mexican and two being trans. So I grew up in Southern Arizona next to the Mexican border, and the furthest away I ever was from the Mexican border was 3 hours. So my communities were predominantly Mexican and other BIPOC folks as well, and they were also pretty low income. So there's an overwhelming number of statistics that show that Latinx adolescents and adults are not entering treatment at the same rate as their white counterparts. So the numbers can be like over 50% of young adults aren't entering treatment, or 10% of Latinx adults are seeking treatment versus 50% of white adults are seeking treatment. So there's a few barriers, few reasons for this disparity, and it can include language barriers, economic barriers, immigration status, and cultural and religious stigma. And for me, cultural stigma played a huge role. So I started treatment when I was 21, and at this point I'd moved out, I had my bachelor's, and I was financially independent, and my partner at the time made me get into treatment. And because I wasn't in treatment in undergrad, I didn't have access to resources from the Disability Center. I felt robbed from a, better college experience. And most importantly, I suffered for a lot of years unnecessarily. So one of the NAMI principles is that principles of support is that mental illnesses are a traumatic event, and it's true. So, you know, I definitely felt that, like, being Mexican, my culture really did rob me from some opportunities if I had entered treatment earlier, as, you know, in my late teens or something. And another way that intersectionality has played out is being bipolar and being trans. You know, when I came out, my mental health wasn't the greatest. Understandably so. I moved to Washington from Wisconsin. I started a new job. I started grad school, and I was rationing out my antipsychotic because I couldn't find a psychiatrist. So on more than a few occasions, it was suggested that, you know, maybe my coming out as trans was really a result of the mania. So I think a lot of people might hold this idea that disabled folks may not be able to know themselves as well as, you know, other people might, as non-disabled people might. The cat he wants treats. So yeah, so it's, when it comes to things like being queer or non-binary, you know, everybody's an expert of themselves, and, you know, disability doesn't really impact that ability to be an expert. So that's a couple ways that intersectionality has played out for me. And it's, you know, definitely a few things that we need to address is the idea that disabled people don't know themselves that well, and that, you know, BIPOC folks, like Latinx folks, Black folks, immigrant communities, have added barriers to seek mental health treatment or to seek healthcare treatment to help them with, you know, their disability.
Thank you so much, Vince, and thank you to your cat. Christiana, you ready?
So for me, I hold the original, like the original intention of intersectionality, which was created in the 80s by a legal scholar named Kimberly Crenshaw. And Kimberly Crenshaw talked about in her research how Black cis women were not being hired at automobile manufacturing companies. And when she went to go look at that, the company was like, oh, no, we hire Black folks and we hire women, so it's cool. And, you know, it's a very binary study, of course, which I'm going to mention into the space, but she found out that they did hire Black folks, but they hired primarily Black cis men for the back of house sort of line work. And they did hire cis women, but they primarily hired white cis women for like front of house administrative work. So in this sort of space, Black women, or Black cis women in this case, in particular with this research study, was experiencing a compounding impact of 2 or more historically or systemically oppressed, exploited, or marginalized identities. I thought I saw ASL coming on the other. I just want to make sure it wasn't a switch. Okay. So that's kind of how I see intersectionality, is sort of like a racialized ableism, because like I was sharing earlier, I really, really, really can't not have both in sort of my experience. There's not really a time when I can just sort of leave one or the other at the door. It always is coming in at all times, in everything. One of the main reasons why I came into becoming a consultant wasn't intentional. I was already doing community organizing work, and but I was going to school to get my LMHC. So my ultimate hope was I was going to become a psychologist, and, you know, I had that sort of original savior complex of like, well, I will become the person who's going to be able to go into the system and help fight the system from the inside and fight all the policies. But in that process, there was so many aspects of that where at the intersection of disability, you know, being in these spaces as an organizer where I would go to the anti-racism space and I would say, hey, disability justice and racialized ableism. And they would say, oh, well, we're talking about race right now. And that's really important. And I think I know a place where you can go where you can talk about that because it's really important to talk about. It's not here. So they would send me to the disability space and I would say, disability justice and racialized ableism. And the disability space is like, oh, we're talking about disability over here. We're not talking about race. I mean, that's important, but that's not what we're talking about. Maybe if you go to this space, then they'll talk about it there. And so, you know, after a while, I either had to find folks out of this area or I had to make the spaces to have the resources that I need, because I was in a situation where I was in a toxic work environment and experiencing that racialized ableism with my workplace, who had the sort of anti-Black sort of a stereotype that I was going to come in and be like sort of the magical Black person that was going to come and do all of the casework for a social work department at one of the local general hospitals as the housing coordinator by myself, by the way. And so I guess the mismatch of me asking for the accommodations that I deserve and this sort of archetype where they just figured that I would just do all the things and not complain. And then I guess the toxicity of productivity culture all sort of came together. And even as a person who organized with my union, SEIU 1199 Northwest, had a great anti-racist sort of lens and could pick out what was happening when it pertained to racism and anti-Blackness. But they didn't have a disability justice or even disability rights line. So they couldn't see the ableism and they really couldn't see the racialized ableism. All of last year, we talked about how Black and brown folks are disproportionately impacted and dying of COVID-19. And then we also talked on the other side, how disabled folks are being deprioritized for care due to, you know, these eugenicist notions of that archetype. But are we talking about the Black and brown and Indigenous folks who are disabled, who are also being deprioritized of care, who are not able to go to the hospital? Because that is an intersection that exists. There's so many examples I can share, but I think what I really want folks to get is that the nuances, those intersections, not just to think about race and then disability, but all of it all together. And not even just race and disability. To think about it like a Rubik's Cube, where there's all the different sort of prisms that you can see at any given time. At that center part of the cube is kind of like all of the cubes at once, right? We're prisms of folks. As Audre Lorde says, we're not single issue beings. We don't live single issue lives. So when we don't think and talk and implement and embed intersectionality into our actions, into our organizing, into our workplaces, into our policies, into our laws, into who we hire, then we're not really getting to the foundation, to the mycelium, to the water table, to the bedrock of some of the issues. And I will say this too. I mean, there's some disabled folks that get mad at me because they're like, Christiana, we really are just trying to talk about disability, and you're always bringing race and intersectionality up in here. But look at it this way. If you can acknowledge that there's racism and Black Lives Matter, Black disabled lives matter. And that doesn't mean your life doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, if we can address some of the disparities that's happening, just like Disability Justice says, with the leadership of those most impacted, everyone benefits. It's not a zero-sum game. So it's really, really important that we hold and recognize the wholeness of everyone and how interdependent that is. in our fight against not only ableism, but the entire oppressive system of inequity. And so I really, really hope that in this, that you will start to, when you're thinking about ableism, or if you're thinking about racism, or you're thinking about, you know, anything that ends in an ism or ology, that you will do it intersectionally. That is my call to action.
Christiana, I just want to say that somebody asked you to run for office in the chat box. So, Angela, would you like to say some things?
Yes, this is Angela. I am white, and oftentimes people focus on color, so that's what they see first. But you do have to think about the whole person in regards to, say, disability. I mean, so I'm white, I'm deafblind, I'm a woman. And oftentimes people label the deafblind as the worst. And I think it's because the hearing world can be oppressive of the deaf. But deaf people can be oppressive of deafblind. So it's sort of a continuum. So as far as inclusivity, as far as values, as far as how all that comes together to make, you know, a whole person, it's sort of like you have similarities with different groups, but not with every group. So for example, you know, if I were to go out in the evening, go out to maybe a party, something like that, and there might be deaf people socializing, it would tend to be pretty dark, you know, for a party setting with lots of people moving around. So if I'm to go into that room and join the party, I'm not going to be able to see. Most deaf people, you know, when they find out I'd like to do tactile signing, they'll just sort of back away. They're not interested in doing that. So it's sort of that distanceism that I was speaking about before. So that's just one example. Another one would be people are not always willing to adjust the lighting. Maybe, you know, if we turn the lights up, it would work better. Also, as far as being led, you know, or help, like having help accessing different areas. Some people are not willing to do that. Oftentimes people will sign very, very quickly. And if you ask them to slow down, they're not willing to do that. You know, it's sort of an oppressive experience even within that larger subgroup. And then there's also groups, you know, say we're speaking about different ethnic groups or different groups of cultures within the deaf community. Obviously, I cannot speak for them, but you know, they have their own stories. My experience is my own. So yeah, that all plays into it.
Thank you so much, Angela. And Eric, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah. You know what? I'm a white dude and I cannot speak to this.
Man, I love it. Thank you for recognizing the fact that this is not your area of expertise and not your space in order to take it. That's fabulous. You know, based on time, we had some more questions, but since we got running a little late, I think we're going to skip the rest of our questions, unfortunately. So I guess that's all the more reason to tune in next time. So Kimberly, do you want to transition us into kind of the next part of our evening?
Thanks, Robin. I appreciate it. And I appreciate, again, all of our presenters. It's been absolutely amazing to hear your answers and your responses. And it's been all very thought-provoking. So the next part of our presentation is actually going to be, we've invited Anita Whitfield. And Anita Whitfield is with the Office of Equity and Social Justice with the King County. And we have been working in our advocacy work with the Office of Equity and Social Justice and Anita on identifying ableism within King County and ways to address it, which is, again, as Robin said at the beginning of this event, that this is why these events have come about. And so I would like to invite Anita to make any comments if she'd like.
Trying to get there. Here I come. On my way. Sorry, everybody. Sorry. Thank you. Oh, I will. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for allowing me to be here with you. I will introduce myself officially. My name is Anita Louise Whitfield. My preferred pronouns are she, her. I am a Black female, light skin. I have a shaved head. I have green eyes. The result of an ancestor being raped by a slave master. I am wearing a blue and black long sleeve top. While I regularly wear jewelry, I have no jewelry on today, except I have large silver hoop earrings on today. My title at King County is Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer, which means that I, as Kimberly said, I am honored to work with the staff in the Office of Equity and Social Justice, but I also am on the King County Executive Senior Leadership Team, and so provide or attempt to provide leadership as it relates to equity and social justice and anti-everyism throughout the government in all of our efforts. Yes, that is what I will share with you about myself today. And although I have that long title, the real title that I try to fit into is simply servant. That is what I am trying to be. I guess a few comments. I know that we don't have a lot of time, but I would start with some sincere thank you to Kimberly and the Alliance of People with Disabilities, and also to Robin and the ARC of King County. I also need to say thank you to those of you who are part of the community at the King County Disability Consortium. And a real, genuine, honest, heartfelt, deep to the bottom of my feet, thanks to all the advocates, all the organizations that have been working, fighting to serve the disability community, to uplift the community, and those who have called on King County government just on to do better. I thank you. I thank you for your advocacy. I thank you for your voice. I thank you for your strength. I thank you for inviting us, me, and others in King County to learn with you. I thank you for holding us accountable in partnership. That may be the biggest gift that anybody can give. I thank you for trying to trust us enough to give us a chance to partner with you. And I thank you all particularly Kimberly and Robin, for creating this space today. Thank you for that. I could spend an hour, another hour, speaking about, sharing my thoughts about processing my feelings about my understanding of, or lack of understanding of, so much that y'all have said here today. But I know that we don't have an hour, so I'm just gonna try to hit on a couple points, although I will say I have some pretty copious notes. But a couple things that I am taking away today, and a couple of things that I have new understanding of. I'll start right there real quick. I think today, because of this session, I have a new understanding of what it must feel like to be a privileged white, cis, for example, man, trying to enter into a heartfelt and meaningful discussion on race with me, right? I have a new found experience of not wanting to offend, not wanting to look stupid, all of the things that they must feel. But I also have a profound need to truly understand, a need so great that it takes precedence over my individual and personal comfort, if that makes any sense to anybody. So I step into this with you with all of my shortcomings, my foibles, my everything that I am, that is not what y'all need me to be. Yet I'm stepping right on in there with you. So I ask for your grace as we walk this journey together. As Kimberly said, this is probably the first of a number of these sessions and the beginning of a number of actions that we have to take together. I'm going to say that I surely do appreciate I appreciate the discussion, the sharing, the personal sharing, which is not always easy, right? Because it brings up and it stirs and it hurts again and all of those things, right? But the fact that you will and you can makes me able, willing, and committed to doing the same. I appreciate the focus on intersectionality, and I must say that I know something about intersectionality from life, but also from learning. But y'all today illuminated the critical nature of centering not only equity and social justice or anti-racism or anything, but centering intersectionality in all of its different forms. So I thank you for that. I continue to learn about intersectionality. I continue to learn about all of us, about where needs are greatest, what needs are real, what needs look like on a day-to-day basis in a variety of communities. And while I'm still learning about that those intersections and that intersectionality, what I do know pretty clearly is about our interdependence as human beings. One of my true North Star guiding lights are the words of Martin Luther King, and I carry them with me. And I share them just briefly. And it is, he said that all life is interrelated, that we're caught in an that we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied, tied in a single garment of destiny. And he ended with, whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. And I believe in that. I believe that. And so that just boils down to a belief that what affects you affects me, and vice versa. Just trying to stay short. I just like to highlight really quickly, if I could, some of the teachings, the learnings, the things that were shared in this venue that I am walking away with. Just a couple things. I love the dignity that Eric showed when he said his last comment, the dignity to us all. Hey, he said, I'm a white dude and I can't speak to this. That is showing the rest of us dignity. And I would like to bring that same spirit to our work together. Angela talked about dignity and shared humanity, or maybe that's just what I took her words to mean. But she said, make sure that we remember the whole person. Sister Christiana, she said that it's like the Rubik Cube, right? We're a prism, right? She taught me today about racialized ableism. And so much of what she said rings so true. And like she said, it's always, all the time. Vince, it struck me when he said, people think that disabled people don't know themselves, right? I'm like, that is too real, which necessarily undermines the theme of today, nothing about us without us. So much of y'all, what you have shared with us here today, speak directly to that. I gotta hurry up, okay? There was just so much. Eric's point about the dignity of risk, brand new to me, and I think life-changing for my way of thinking, my way of being. And speaking of ways of being, Angela and all of you, all of us talked about the reality that there are just different ways of being. I often speak to that in the racial justice or cultural realm, but ain't it the truth, right? It is. There are just different ways of being. There a number of things were said. Also, Angela mentioned, again, my interpretation, but there's a theme of time that runs through really being inclusive, right? Sometimes it takes a little minute, right, to truly be inclusive. And the rush of our society that makes us think that there is anything more important than taking the time that it takes for our shared humanity is a trick. And so y'all just sparking my thoughts, my philosophy, my way of being. I appreciated Christiana saying I mess up all the time, because that is me, a walking, talking mess up, right? I have had to learn to value, to believe that I inherently, as a human being, bring value. That's been a journey, and one that I'm sure all y'all can understand. Vince's words about uplifting and co-working with the community in a non-condescending way, and that the people who are at the core should invite allies to the table, not necessarily the other way around.
Miss Anita?
You want me to stop?
Oh my goodness, I want to
Okay.
listen to you every minute, but you know, I'm aware of the time, and
Yes.
thank you.
Thank
you
you.
so much for your honest, your heartfelt, your very conscious, and just, yeah, the attention. I can't thank you enough for being here and for sharing your perspectives, and really, in a way, being put on the spot. And so your humility and your clear passion for humanity really means a lot to me, and I imagine to this whole community. So thank you. So as I look at the clock, I realize that we had planned to wrap up at 6:30. And we also had hoped to go through some questions from the community. If people feel strongly about sticking around a few minutes, we could do questions. Well, there's no way we'll get through all of them, but I can also offer that we will spend time with these questions and ask the panelists and ourselves to provide some responses, as well as if there's any questions specific to the county, we will share that with Miss Anita and her team and work with trying to get responses out to the community. So I'm not seeing anyone writing very adamantly in the chat box that they want to continue. Especially, I know our interpreters actually aren't planning on staying forever. They've been working super hard. So let's agree for now to wrap up. We are recording this, and we'll try to get that recording out to everyone. If you registered to come to the event, so we have your contact, your email address. We'll share out answers to questions, and we encourage you to attend future events. And Kimberly, do you have anything else you'd like to share as we bid farewell?
I am actually at a loss for words, really. You won't really find that often with me, that I'm at a loss for words, and I am just inspired by everything that everybody has shared, and the patience that the attendees have given us for getting everything taken care of. I promise, now that we know, it won't be so bad next time. And yes, definitely look forward to more events coming up. We will get those out as soon as possible. We're planning on doing them monthly, so the next one will be in February. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and I'm turning it back to you, Robin.
Yeah, if you're interested in finding out about future events, I think that we'll use the registration list for people here to send things out to. I also encourage you to follow, sounds so cheesy, follow us on Facebook. You know, follow the Arc of King County on Facebook and or the Alliance of People with Disabilities. That's how we make sure to get information out as well. But again, we'll do our best to use this list to help share information so that you can continue to get updates. So that's all I have to say. And again, thank you for your patience, and thank you for the support as we worked through our tech issues. And thank you for being here, and we hope to see you again next time. So have a good night.